This is Philip Steiger at thebest3d.com, and in this tutorial I want to experiment a little bit with animated textures and create some crazy stuff. Let me start by showing an animation I saved, and this one here, essentially some sort of a sky animation. Right, so let me show how I started with that, and then we'll build on that. So the starting point really is to create an animation of, oh, I don't know, something like 66 frames. Keep it short initially, and it might be blank initially. So let's go right-click here on the clear all frames. It's all white. All right. So at this point, and in fact, it doesn't matter. We just will render over that and go render the sky. Now, when you render the sky, you can indicate a number of choices. I've played with the parameters here a little bit for the iteration. You might make it soft or very detailed. You might add, change the scale of it for small clouds or bigger ones. The phase, you can change the heading, in which direction we're looking. That can create some interesting angles. The pitch, all sorts of different parameters to experiment with here, and also the zoom factor, perhaps a wide angle like this, and then the cloud threshold also. So you see only some of the clouds, or you see a lot of it, and also the cloud fall off can be crisp or sudden or progressive. So there's a little bit of variance here to experiment with, and of course the gradient itself that controls the coloring of the clouds, and the cloud the background color of the sky, which is blue in this case. I'm going to keep it black, like so. And the fog color, which down here towards the bottom fades, let's say give it a little bit of a yellowish tint. There you go. In fact, we probably should have that the other way, towards the, if this is up, yeah, we should probably change the pitch or the heading. Let's see. Let's turn it back this way. Keep the heading like this up. So it's not upside down. Okay, and then we go and animate this. We animate it with is changing X, Y, and Z axis. The Z axis is actually in fractal space, so you'll see the clouds change shape. Maybe we'll give it a little bit more of that and less of the speed in which it moves towards us. And the sideways movement in particular, very little. Well, let's keep it like this and apply that. Alright, so you now see the clouds are changing shape. You see some of the colors from the gradient appearing, others disappearing, and we have a nice starting point for the clouds. So that's how I started with creating an initial animation. Now what I'll do is I'll make this one much longer. So I'll go to the filter menu and animated motion prediction module. That one can actually add sometimes some interesting side effects. I'm going to give it 6 or 7 here for the dry run at definitely longer animation. And if that's okay, I'll undo the dry run and actually render it, perhaps even with some refinement pass for more calculations. It might take a little bit longer, but sometimes it's worth it. And what we'll do is we'll create therefore an animation with about 400 or 500 frames. Now that's intentionally a little bit too long, but I wanted to show you how to combine that with the same animation that's a little bit shorter. So I'll make 2 different versions. I'll save this one. In fact, the motion prediction module, I need to remember that the first frame is a copy of the last, so I'll delete this one so we don't get this. And we have this animation now. FPS, frames per second, let's set it to 30. And so we see this animation now as it is. What I'll do is I'll save this one. That's one to save. Let's go save it from the animation menu and call it another sky. What's that? That's going to be sky number 4. There you go. Okay, so now I'm going to make it shorter. I'm right-clicking on the frames here and calling for the time stretch. That's another way to expand the animation. This time I'm stretching it backwards, meaning I'm dividing the number of frames. And I'll divide by 2 or even by 3. Let's see, that would be initially it was 447 frames. Let's say I want 120 or 123 there. And make sure we do a frame blending. and apply that. So now we have a much shorter frame sequence. It's playing faster. And what's going to be really interesting is to use one with the other as a displacement. So check this out. First of all, I'm going to save this one also. So that one's going to be saved at the same name, but with something like fast or faster. Fast. There you go. So that's a shorter version of the long one. All right. So now the idea is to take this animation and displace it by itself. I can do that by loading this animation into the swap buffer as an animation. Under the animation menu, animated swap image. I actually did that earlier, so let me uncheck that. It was a different animation. Let's go do that again now. Animated swap image, open DWA, that's or an AVI file if you saved it as an AVI. But this one here I'll save as I open the DWA, which is the same one, so that's the fast, and apply that. So now what's happening is nothing is visible yet unless I tell the system to combine the main images with the swap image equivalents from the swap buffer that I just enabled, right? What I did here, I just say, yeah, use these frames from this animation file for the swap image. And I can see that if I switch to the swap buffer, I'm actually looking at the same, because this one is the same sequence. I can also swap back, and I'm back in the main buffer here. And I can combine the two together, and you see a multiply, typically increasing the contrast. But you could also change the layer mode to something different, get something like color burn, and all sorts of different effects there. What I'll do really is to simply create a displacement. You can preview it here with the filter displace by swap and see what that does. So this image is displacing itself. Right? And we want to do that not just on this one frame, but the entire frame sequence. To do that, we will go to the timeline, and in the timeline we can find similar filters, including displace by swap. There's a whole category for pool displace, for instance, and you can see the effect that it has. It's very subtle, it's very quick too, so you want to see what that does, apply it. And so now we have a bit of a turbulent effect here. If you play this, you can see it's doing an interesting turbulent effect. Now sometimes you do this again, just apply again, same parameters, and you get even more of that displacement. Sometimes you want to do that until you get really the effect of like clouds and turbulent noise on it. And then maybe you need to upside down, like flip it vertically. Let's go flip it vertical. Right, not just this frame, but the whole sequence. There you go. So this could be more of a water scenario. Maybe it will invert it, and then it's perhaps more of a fiery reddish. Maybe expand the dynamic range. There you go. And then now let's do some more displacement. Let's apply, in fact, the same one. Because we've inverted it now, it's doing some really crazy stuff. Now it might be a good idea to either invert it again, but I'd really like these white parts to turn kind of red, like red fire. So I think this is one way we want to apply a different color map. So let's go to the color group and map to gradient and see if we have a gradient available. Yeah, this one here probably will be nice. Yeah, that will look a little bit more like fire. Like lava flow or something like that. There's a couple of others to look through. And if these 8 gradients don't do it, then switch to a different gradient. You have so many gradients available. But you can also, plus you can create your own. So let's go, let's apply this one here. Apply that. So now we have a bit more of a fire and a cloud look. Let's see if we can do that even more so. So it's even darker now. That's too much. Let's undo that. Make sure you have the save undo enabled every time you use it, because it allows you to go back one step. All right. Now, of course, there's some displacement that wasn't producing interesting image at the top here, so we'll crop that eventually. What we'll do is we will select the area of interest, maybe with the rectangle selection tool or with the new crop tool. But what I'll do is I'll use, in this case, the rectangle selection tool, and select roughly this much of it here. And we can preview, we can scrub through that to make sure we are safely outside of the area that is unusable, and simply crop to that. So image, crop to selection, and it's doing that across the entire animation. And maybe you need to then resample the image back to the original dimensions. So let's go to image and resample and tell it to go back to, what was that, 640 by 360. We didn't keep the aspect ratio, so we will need to change that here a little bit, but that's okay. We can apply that. And so now it's resampling, and Control D to get rid of the selection mask. There you go. And we now have a nice little fiery look. And if we want to make it look like this is at the ceiling, again, all we need to do is flip it upside down. Flip it vertically. There you go. So now we're kind of looking at the ceiling. We're inside a burning house, and we see the smoke and the fire blowing away with the wind. All right, so that's one of the things I wanted to show you, is that you can create some really interesting effects by displacing the image that's in the main buffer with an image, a different image, or the same image that's in the swap buffer, and apply that even across an animation. Now, even better if you have two animations. One is actually the same but on a time stretch, and you can do that now. For instance, if you use the one that I saved initially, this one, long one, Sky 4, right? And then I load into the animation the shorter one. This one right now is the same one, so I load as the animation here the shorter one. So let's go and undo and then select the new one and say take the faster one here. So now I have two animations. Right? And if I blend them together, you can see that they're not animating at the same time. They kind of, you can tell that it's like two animations kind of semi-transparently combined together. Initially, the first frame is perfectly lined up, but then one of them is playing faster than the other. All right, and that's exactly the idea there, that you can do things to make it even more interesting, because there are some different phenomenons happening here. So, for instance, when it comes to combining, or let's see, where is it here, the combine one with the swap, you could combine with swap. You can mix the two buffers, and you can show the one in the main buffer or the one in the swap buffer, or anywhere in between. Right, so now here you see that there are two things that are moving, and it's going to create some really interesting effects doing that as well. Right, so here's one, for instance. Let's apply the two together in a multiply mode. And what you end up getting is, it looks like two cloud layers that are moving, both at the same time. And that sometimes really will give you some really interesting effects there too. The other things that we could do, and in fact, you know what? I think I have an animation that's too long. I'm going to go a different way now. I'm going to open the short one into the main buffer. So the short one is here. That's the fast one. And then the longer one is the one that I'm going to pick as the swap image. So uncheck the one we're currently using, and then go back here and select the original one, or even a different one. I mean, you don't have to have necessarily one that's derived from the other. You can use two totally unrelated animations. But here is what I wanted, really. We have a short animation, and we have a longer animation, and the two are being combined together. All right, so let's do a displacement of that. Let's do a displace like this, where we have a displacement of one image by the other, the main by the swap buffer, and they're not moving at the same speed. So that's going to add yet another component of interesting effects. Let's apply it 2 or 3 times, and then you'll start seeing some yet another level of interesting effects here. Maybe not what I wanted, so let's go and open that original one again. Let's go, the fast one is the one I want to use here. And this time I'll use not the displace, but the cloaking displace. Let's see what that does. Cloaking displays, or pool displays. Yeah, that one looks just really interesting. Let's go to that. And then even more fascinating if you apply a vertical flip on one or the other, right? So if you do, for instance, the flip horizontal. Let's try horizontal in this one. So the animation goes one way, but the swap animation goes the other way, and then doing a displacement is yet another story. So you get all sorts of different currents going across each other, right? So that's what we're kind of witnessing here now. Um, some different levels of animations going along different directions. And so I wanted to just show you some of the effects you can create with that. You know, it's quite different when you start working with these animations and displacing them against others. Let me take this one here, for instance. There's one with a tree in front of it, and what I want to do is again do some sort of a displacement of that. And let's go apply that. And so now we have now created something yet again rather fascinating. And now sometimes, you know, you use actually these effects with the displacement to make it look like it's raining and you're looking at this scene through a window and it's splashing rain against the window. Let me undo this most recent one. So we actually see this tree, and I want to create an animation in which the rain is falling down vertically. Right, so that's what we'll need to do, is we'll need to get rid of this swap image right now being used and simply focus on the rainfall. So one way to do that is actually use our snow filter, the snowfall, and apply that against the you know, perhaps even just against a black. Let's go switch the color to dark for the background color and erase to that all frames. And so the entire animation is dark. And what we'll do is we'll apply the snowfall on that, and we'll make sure that it goes not too fast, a lot of it, and large, make it a big snowflakes. And then quite a bit of turbulence, and the wind speed, make it go vertical, so no side wind, no side motion. There you go. The velocity is now simply a vertical motion, and if you keep the velocity small, you can see that it's kind of gradually moving downwards. Let's do render that once. Yep, now we see that happening there, and let's do render that perhaps one more time on top with a little bit more velocity. Apply that. So we now have several levels of things moving down, and we will use that exact animation as a displacement map. Right. So the way to do that is to save that as an animation. Save snow down. Let's call this snow down. And now we can nominate this under animation, animated swap image, as the animation to use in the swap buffer. So snow down is our selection here. And we can load our main animation. That's the scene with the sunset and the tree. Open that. That was this one here, another sky 2B. So here it is again. And we do have the animated buffer in the background that we can see, and we can use it to displace. So let's go do the displacement now, right there. And as we displace it, it will look like the displacement is streaming down, because that's exactly what the snowflakes are doing. So that will give you that impression that we sort of have a rainfall against the window. And there you go. It's subtle. It's a lot. Actually, the displacement is too big right now, because we have big ones on those snowflakes. They were a little bit too intense, too big. So we can perhaps just displace that a little bit less and see if we can recover some of that. But it would really be better to actually make them a little bit smaller. Anyway, that gives you the idea of how you can create sort of this rainy day look, where it's displacing the images in a sort of vertical flow motion. And that will trick the eye into thinking that we're actually looking at it through water splashing against the window. Now we can still do other stuff with that too, and animations of many different styles, but I wanted to focus on just that displacement that we can apply in a variety of ways, and with a variety of different speeds or animations. So some animations with longer durations and some with less of that. All right, so that's that, and thanks for watching.